Hi everyone, welcome back to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton and another Scout Report video. I'm joined by Oscar from All Leeds TV. Oscar, thanks for coming back on, mate.
No problem at all, mate. No problem. I mean, we know it's the summer when this transfer, well, potential transfer we're discussing is come back round yet again for probably a second window on the bounce, I think, now.
Yeah. I mean, it sort of surprised me in a way that we were going to be talking about it again. But to be honest, if you really think about it, it's not surprising at all. It's one of them transfers that is probably going to stick around until it either gets done or one of the parties just stops wanting to become involved in it. So what was your first reaction to the idea that, obviously, by the way, we are talking about Wilfried Gnonto. Last season, of course, it was a big saga that ran through a lot of the window, wasn't it? So what was your first reaction to the rumours that it might be a goer again this summer? I know what mine were, but from a Leeds point of view, how did you feel about, was it a case of, oh no, not again?
Not a massive surprise, to be fair, mate. I'll be honest. It's not to be at all disrespectful to Everton, because I'm not obviously fully aware. I'm very much an outsider looking in at Everton's financial situation. I'm very surprised. It's actually come about in terms of Everton again. I did think Gnonto would get linked with moves. I think all our players are going to get linked with moves. And look, the reality is we're going to lose most of those players. Rutter, Somerville, Gnonto. If we carry on in the Championship, it's going to be difficult to persuade them to stay. So I'm very much, not surprised by that at all. But in terms of the fee mentioned, it's probably going to take quite a lot, I'd imagine, to get this one done. I'm not saying it won't get done, but I'd imagine we're talking similar money to last time around, which I think was the stumbling block in the negotiations last August, as far as I'm aware, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, again, this one just brings up all sorts of red flags for me in my head. Um, Obviously, it's been a year. Refresh our minds a little bit because obviously, I haven't watched much of you guys last season. Just tell us a little bit about him. You know what kind of player he is, because he doesn't strike me really as an Everton player.
Yeah, that's very fair. Certainly under Sean Dyche, he's not a sort of a conventional Sean Dyche kind of winger. He's not especially fast or physical. In terms of, obviously, Jack Harrison, a player I know a lot about, was obviously spent the year at Everton. Is obviously spending another year at Everton at the very least. Very much more of a Sean Dyche winger, as is Dwight McNeil. That's for me what a conventional Sean Dyche winger would be: is fast, quite physical, and maybe not the most technical in the world, but certainly hard working and able to sort of defend as well. And that's not really sort of Gnonto's game. Gnonto, I'd say, is a lot more technical than the Jack Harrison, for example. Um, he does like the ball to feet a lot more than, say, Harrison or McNeil. He won't sort of run in behind very much. He's someone who wants to have the whole attack kind of built around him in that kind of sense. And listen, he's a very, very good player. There's no doubt about it. I think he is probably, when we talk about too good for the Championship, I think people like Somerville and Rutter are clearly too good for the Championship. Gnonto is probably on the borderline where he's easily a Premier League player, but he's not like especially better than the league, if that makes sense in terms of his output. I think he was still down on that kind of regards compared to other players he was competing against at Leeds in terms of goals and assists. But listen, when he got into a run of form last season, the second half of last season, he was absolutely brilliant, and he's an absolutely brilliant player who I genuinely thought, if he didn't go to Everton, I thought his Leeds career was done, to be honest, in August. The way the whole thing came about, obviously from the Everton side of things, I think it was called Free Willy, wasn't it? Was that the Twitter movement at the time? I mean, we had something similar with Free Ben White about 2 years before that. It's one of those. It's quite weird when you're on like the receiving end of it. It's quite different. But yeah, there was all sorts of different bits and pieces. I remember we got beat by Birmingham whilst that transfer saga was going on, and Gnonto was in Harrogate, I think, at that point, talking to Everton fans. So the whole thing was like how it turned around so quickly is credit to Gnonto. He's clearly got a lot of character, and that probably served him well in the Sean Dyche team. What I'll say about Gnonto is I'm still unsure of what his best position actually is. In terms of, I think he is a winger, but whether he's better on the left or on the right, I'm not too sure. Last season, he played most of his minutes on the right. Played well, no doubt about it, but he wasn't the undisputed starter on that side of the pitch. Dan James, again, another player that I think us and Everton have been involved in, started probably most of the games last season down that right-hand side. So he wasn't an undisputed starter, which is interesting. And on the left-hand side, Somerville was his competition, and Somerville was the best player in the league last season. So it very much feels to me like we're still trying to work out what Gnonto's best position is. We have tried him at false 9 from time to time and number 10. But I do think all in all, he's best suited as a winger. But whether he's a left-sided or right-sided winger, I'm not sure. And can I just clarify as well, when I was talking about, obviously, the fee in terms of Everton's financial situation, obviously, Onana has left for Villa. But to me, if I'm Everton, and it's not just my Leeds bias hat on here kind of thing, I don't really understand why Everton would spend such a large part of that, say, Onana budget on Gnonto. It doesn't really make sense to me in that kind of sense, unless Dyche has got something special in store for him. I'm not sure, but he's a very good player. There's no question about that. But is he the most natural fit Everton can get for that team? In all honesty, probably not. I think he looked better for us because in the Championship, we have a lot of the ball. 60, 70% possession. It suits Gnonto a lot more than, say, playing for Everton, where you're going to have to be defending in the deep from time to time and not have a lot of the ball in games. And I don't think that's Gnonto's game, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly the same, Oscar. I mean, for us, this one really surprised me because, like you're talking about the financial situation, obviously, with Onana going, I wasn't expecting somebody like Gnonto for there to be any revived interest. I was expecting it to be more loan players and players on the cheap rather than looking at a player who, let's be honest, for Everton is quite a high risk. You spoke about him then. You're not sure which wing he can play on, what his best position is. You spoke about Leeds in the Championship having a lot of the ball probably suits his game a lot better. I want to talk a little bit about, obviously, you mentioned there one of them, Jack Harrison, who was fantastic for us last season, really fitted that Sean Dyche system really well because he was able to track back. He was able to do a lot of the defensive work, the likes of Nathan Patterson, Ben Godfrey and Seamus Coleman. They were a bit more secure there, having Harrison in front of them. I'm guessing from the way you're talking that Wilfried Gnonto is not that kind of player.
No, I wouldn't say so. I think he's tenacious in the press, but I think when it goes to having to chase back in terms of the opposite fullback running ahead of him and him having to switch roles in terms of having to mark the opposite fullback, I don't think that suits him at all, really. I don't think it's something he's not been great at for Leeds pretty much throughout his time at Leeds, to be honest. And that's not to take him away anything from him as a player. A lot of our wingers are like that, to be totally honest. And I think a lot of what happens at Leeds is Daniel Farke's instruction is he wants his wingers to stay high, even when we've not got the ball, just so we can counter-attack kind of thing. Because when we win the ball back, the wingers are high up the pitch and we can just get straight back up kind of thing. And that's the kind of the way Daniel Farke likes to play. And obviously Dyche, he wants his teams to defend in two banks of four and it's been fantastically successful in the Premier League. Is Gnonto that player? Probably not. But what I would say as well is it's not so much that I'd be concerned with as an Everton fan. Is he... You could probably call him a luxury player, to be honest. But does he produce enough in the final third to justify that? I think he does at Championship level, no question about it. But at Premier League level, that's still to be decided. And don't get me wrong, it was great for us in the Premier League. He played under numerous different systems. And when we had that chaotic season, that probably kept everything up, really, how chaotic we were in terms of we went from Jesse Marsh to Javi Gracia to then Big Sam in charge. So he's played in numerous different systems and looked decent in all of them. But definitely what I'd say is probably Sam Allardyce. I'm not saying he's the same as Sean Dyche at all, but that's probably the most similar style of football. And that was probably the period of form where he looked the least comfortable, to be honest, in the Leeds shirt. So that would concern me. And I think the biggest thing is he's a luxury player, but does he guarantee ridiculous output? Everton have had so many fantastic players, maybe not so much in recent years, but all the time I've been watching Everton, you've always had that classic kind of number 10 or winger, Kevin Morales, Stephen Pienaar, that kind of player. I'm thinking, is Wilfried Gnonto that? No, to be honest with you, he's not that right now. And listen, he's still only 21, so he could definitely get to a very high level, but he's not that right now. And I think that's what Everton kind of need under Sean Dyche, is ready-made, proven players in that kind of sense. Like a Jack Harrison, for example, where you kind of know what Jack Harrison is. Yes, he can be inconsistent, but he is, a very solid 7 out of 10, sort of Premier League player, really. But Gnonto, his ceiling's higher. It's higher than Jack Harrison, no question about it, but his floor is also lower than Jack Harrison, if that makes sense. So it's definitely high risk, high reward. But yeah, I would be surprised if if this deal went through, to be honest. I would be a little bit surprised if it actually ended up going through. I think Gnonto could leave, but I don't know. Are Everton going to pay that money for Gnonto? I'm not sure. But obviously, you'll have a much better idea than me, mate. But I don't see this one going through. I just feel like it's one of those transfers that we'll be talking about this time next year again as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think with this one, it might just be one of those transfers that we talk about for years, the great transfers that never happened, because I can't see this one happening unless there's, like you said, Sean Dyche's got some crazy plan for him. That I mean, Dyche's a great manager. Maybe that's the idea, because he's going to take him and nurture him and tell him he's the best thing ever. But you know, I can't picture Wilfried Gnonto coming to Everton and wanting to play the system, under the cosh from a lot of the big teams every week, and having to do all the running. I think Leeds in the Championship suits him a lot better, and I think for me, if I was Wilfried Gnonto, I'd be wanting to push on at Leeds and get better and better and better, and move to a club in the Premier League in a few years' time, where you're going to be looking at playing that similar type of football that Leeds played in the Championship last season. Are you a bit cautious again, for the sake of the whole team, about what he did last season? Obviously, didn't want to play for Leeds after hearing of the interest from Everton. You spoke there about the story at the beginning of last season where you lost, and he wasn't with the squad.
Yeah, of course. I think any player where something like that happens, it wasn't just one game either. It was 3 games. I think it started off in a League Cup game. Then I think it took over 2 league games. So it went on for about 10 or 12 days. It wasn't just a 1 or 2 days of madness. This went on for a sustained period of time. So there's no question about it. There was probably talks between Daniel Farke and Gnonto throughout this period, and it took 10 or 12 days to get to the bottom of it. So there's definitely something underlying there that you've got to be concerned with, in terms of there's probably some tension, if this does kick off again, in terms of, I think Daniel Farke made it very clear when Gnonto did come back into the team. Ironically, he scored, I think, within 20 minutes of his game back, and pretty much from then on, really, there was no issues at all with Gnonto's relationship with the fan base. In all honesty, obviously there was isolated incidents, but in the main, I think Gnonto was very popular last season. It was numerous times, you'd hear Wilfried Gnonto's name chanted, and he's still a very popular part of the team. He started the playoff final. He did establish himself towards the end of the season on that right hand side. Of course, there was definitely a concern, but I think with Gnonto, it's as much with the other players as well. Somerville, there's a factor in there as well. Rutter, there's a factor in there as well. I think from a Leeds point of view, I'm not naive enough to think these players are going to want to carry on in the Championship. In an ideal world, they'll all want to go to the Premier League. There's no question about it. Why would you not want to go to the Premier League? But we've got to be looking to keep, at least half of these players. Obviously, we've already lost Archie Gray. Glenn Kamara's left as well. We've got to then keep the rest of our midfield. And then with the wingers, at the moment, all of our wingers are still at the club. I think Dan James is the one where you say that's probably the safest bet that's going to stay with us in the Championship. But after that, obviously, Somerville, Gnonto, Rutter, who can play out wide as well, it's still very much up in the air. But I think we've got to be aiming to keep 2 of those players, really. At the very least 1. We can't be losing all 3. So definitely some nerves about it, mate. And, I look at the Championship right now and say we've got probably the strongest squad. At times last season, you'd probably say we had the strongest squad. But I'm not, naive enough to think it will look exactly the same this time 3 weeks from now, kind of thing. It could look very, very different. Last year, it was the total opposite. We had a terrible squad going into the season, and all of a sudden, the Gnonto saga calmed down, and we added players off the back of that kind of thing. And if anything, it's not to sound like sour grapes or anything, but that kind of saga last season, it kind of helps us in a way, kind of thing. In a weird way, it kind of helps us, because Gnonto came back and he just knew he had to be absolutely flying from the off, kind of thing. Otherwise, he'd lose the fans quickly, kind of thing. He had to be absolutely on it straight away. And to be fair, that kind of sort of galvanized the whole team. But this season, it's a little bit different, because we're coming into the season on the position of strength. this season it could derail us potentially. But my point of view is, if Gnonto wants to move to Everton, we've got to just get this one done. If Everton can pay the money that we want, I'm not sure what that fee is. Obviously, there's numerous crazy figures mentioned last summer. I'm not sure what that is. But for me, it's probably his time to move on if Gnonto wants to move. If he doesn't, let's kick on and see if we can get into the Premier League next season. But yeah, it depends on Gnonto really. It's very much clear that Gnonto wanted that move last season, and I think a lot of it came from Italy and the Euros in terms of we lost his place in the Italy team. I think it was the international break after we went into the Championship. So I think that was a little bit on his mind as well. Obviously, as it happened, he stayed at Leeds, didn't get in the squad. Who knows if he'd gone to Everton, he might well have got in the squad because he'd been in the Premier League. The Italy manager might have been looking at that. That could be a factor as well. It definitely was a factor last season that was mentioned. There were a few players last season it was mentioned. So, yeah, it's one of those. But I would say I'm 60-40 this deal doesn't happen. Not absolutely certain by any stretch, but for a couple of reasons. The fee involved, as you mentioned, in terms of the style of football, maybe not fully suited Gnonto, and whether someone like Dyche would be fully invested in this one, like, say, a new striker, for example, or a new centre mid to replace Onana. That feels to me like more what Everton will do from the outside looking in. But yeah, I'm sort of 60-40 it won't happen. But if it does happen, all the best to him.
Yeah, I agree with you, Oscar. I think there's better deals that we could be doing at this point in the window when there's still plenty of time left, and with now that we can sort of assess what's going to happen from now in terms of outgoings for Everton. But yeah, thanks very much for your input there on Wilfried Gnonto for the second time in 2 seasons. Hopefully we won't be back
See you next
summer
August.
talking about him again.
Yeah, hopefully not. But I have a feeling next August, next July, we'll be talking about this one again. When Leeds are bottle promotion again, it's one of those. It'll be about the new stadium then as well. Just Gnonto have that factor to add in too. But yeah, listen, all the best for Everton this season. I hope you get that situation sorted out. We've been there ourselves numerous times with not having a clue who our owners are. It's a horrible place to be. The transfer market's probably the worst time as well because you've got all your star players. Obviously, Onana's already gone. Potentially moving on. It's a terrible time. Championship's not much better either, though. To be honest, mate, it's make sure you stay in that Premier League because it's not much fun going to Rotherham away. I can't lie.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on, Oscar. Make sure, obviously, if you haven't heard of All Leeds TV before, you do go and check them out. They're good friends of the channel. And yeah, thank you very much for coming on, Oscar. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Toffee Blues and also All Leeds TV as well. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think of Wilfried Gnonto. Do you want to see him in an Everton shirt, or do you think we should leave it like what happened last summer? Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.